Hey, welcome to the briefing. What I'm going to cover with you today is this. Before you spend the grant, look at the next service cliff. I want to take this one into public service because this is where good intentions can create a bad operating position if the leader does not look far enough ahead. A grant opens. The need is real. The application window is short. The elected body wants progress. The department has been explaining the same service gap for months. Residents are frustrated. Staff finally see a chance to launch something that matters. A mobile outreach team, a permit support desk, a senior transportation pilot, a youth intervention program, a small business assistance program, a community response coordinator. The funding makes the idea possible, and under public pressure, possible starts to feel like responsible. That is where the trap starts. A grant can pay for launch. It may not pay for the expectation the launch creates. It may cover first-year staff, software, outreach material, vehicles, contract support, translation help, data tracking, and startup activity. But what happens when the award period ends? What happens when residents now depend on the service? What happens when community partners start referring people into it? What happens when elected leaders promote it in public meetings? What happens when staff build workflow around it, reporting requirements grow, and the department has no recurring funding, no permanent staffing plan, no replacement plan, and no clean exit strategy? That is the public sector leadership issue. The danger is not accepting grant funding. Grants can be useful. Grants can open doors that the base budget cannot open. The danger is treating grant approval like service sustainability. Those are different things. The award notice may answer, "Can we start?" It does not always answer, "Can we continue?" That is where long-range observation matters. It asks the leader to look beyond the current award and ask what this funded service creates next year, after the grant period, after public expectation grows, and after the agency has to carry the program without the same support. The question is not only, can we fund this now? The better question is, what public promise are we creating, and can the agency carry it when the funding changes? Picture a mid-sized county. We will call the Community Services Director Alicia. Her department manages public-facing programs that residents depend on when they are already frustrated. Housing referrals, senior assistance, transportation coordination, food access partnerships, basic navigation support, and help for residents who do not know which agency, department, or nonprofit is supposed to handle their need. The call volume is up. Residents are tired of being transferred. Nonprofit partners are reporting higher demand. The county commission wants visible action. Staff are stretched. The regular budget is tight. Nobody has enough people, enough time, or enough flexible money. Then a grant opportunity appears. It can support a 2-year mobile outreach and service navigation pilot. The program would place a small outreach team in rural communities and underserved neighborhoods several days a week. The team would help residents connect to county services, complete intake forms, understand eligibility requirements, coordinate referrals, and avoid unnecessary trips to the main government office. That is a strong public sector idea. It addresses access, it reduces friction, it supports residents who have trouble navigating the system, it gives the county something visible and useful to point to. The grant can pay for the first 2 years of staffing, a vehicle lease, tablets, outreach materials, translation support, contract assistance, and basic data tracking. The first move looks obvious. Apply for the grant, win the award, launch the pilot, serve the public, and show progress. That logic makes sense. The need is real. The public impact could be strong. The elected body wants action. The department wants to help. But Alicia pauses because she knows the program will not just deliver service. It will create expectation. If the outreach team works, residents will depend on it. If partners see it working, they will refer people to it. If elected leaders see public approval, they may want it expanded. If staff build processes around it, the department will absorb new workload. If the grant ends without a sustainability plan, the county may face a service cliff. That is the public sector leadership test, not whether the grant is good or bad. That framing is too thin. This is not a fight between action and caution. The real question is sharper. What expectation is the agency creating? Who will carry it later? And is the leader making that commitment deliberately or just reacting to the funding window? At the surface level, the visible math is powerful. The grant is real. The need is real. The county can finally act. Residents will see movement. The commission can point to progress. The department can close a visible access gap. That short read is not completely wrong. Public sector leaders do not operate in theory. They work inside budget limits, public complaints, staffing gaps, council pressure, commission pressure, compliance requirements, procurement timelines, reporting demands, and real community need. When funding appears, the pressure is to move, apply, accept, announce, hire, contract, serve, report early wins. But the short read misses the future operating condition. A grant is not only money, it creates staffing demand, it creates reporting work, it creates supervision requirements, it creates technology needs, it creates data governance, it creates contract management, it creates public awareness, it creates a service expectation, it creates residents who may now see that pilot as part of county service delivery. It creates partners who may start sending people into the program. It creates elected leaders who may talk about the service before anyone has defined what happens after the award period. That combination changes the decision. The question is no longer, can we launch this program? The question becomes, what does the agency inherit if the program works? Success creates the next decision. That is the part leaders can miss. If the pilot fails, the problem is obvious. But if the pilot succeeds, the service may become familiar. Residents begin using it. Community partners start scheduling around it. County staff begin routing certain cases through it. The commission hears positive feedback. The public starts seeing it as normal. Now the grant may end, but the expectation remains. That is the cliff. A program can be useful, visible, and still unsustainable. That sentence matters. A grant-funded service can solve a current access problem while creating a future trust problem. It can help residents for 2 years and still leave the agency scrambling in year 3. It can create early activity, strong testimonials, clean launch photos, positive public comment, and still fail operationally if nobody reads the continuation cost. The public does not experience funding categories. They experience whether the service exists, whether it works, whether it continues, and whether the agency told the truth about it. So, Alicia looks forward. If the county applies and launches the mobile outreach pilot, what has to exist after the award? Who supervises the outreach team? Who owns grant reporting? Who maintains the vehicle, tablets, software, and translation support? Who handles data quality? Who manages referrals when demand grows? Who responds when the pilot schedule changes? Who answers public questions when the funding period is nearly over? Who tells residents whether this is a permanent service, a limited pilot, or a test with continuation criteria? Those questions are not bureaucracy. They are service integrity. If the grant funds staff for 2 years but no recurring position exists, the county may have to cut the service after residents begin relying on it. If software, tablets, vehicles, and translation support are covered up front but not budgeted later, the program may continue in name while losing operating capability. If reporting is added to an already stretched administrative team, compliance work may pull staff away from other programs. If outreach creates more referrals, but partner capacity is not assessed, residents may experience a new delay after the first contact. If the county announces the pilot like a permanent service before defining the funding horizon, public trust takes the hit when the program changes. That is the public sector warning. The launch can look responsible while the future service condition gets weaker. The award can make action possible, but it does not automatically make the service sustainable. The county may win the grant and still lose control of the expectation. It may create access and still create a future backlog. It may meet a real need and still create a budget problem. It may show impact and still leave staff carrying reporting, case coordination, procurement, data tracking, and partner management without enough capacity. I have seen versions of this mistake before, and I respect it more now than I did earlier in leadership. Under pressure, it is easy to reward the decision that finally lets the organization move. Take the money, start the program, show the public progress, stop explaining why the need is not funded. That sounds practical. Sometimes it is practical, but if the leader does not read the next service condition, the agency can accidentally create a promise it cannot carry. That does not make the original idea bad. It means the launch was not disciplined enough. Once that pattern sets in, grant activity can start pretending to be strategy. Departments chase funding windows because the base budget cannot carry the demand. Programs launch under temporary capacity. Staff get assigned reporting work on top of existing work. Temporary positions start supporting permanent workflow. Elected leaders celebrate the service before continuation is defined. Residents are trained to use something the agency may not be able to keep. Then, near the end of the award period, everyone acts surprised that the service has no permanent home. That is not only a funding problem, that is a leadership rhythm problem. Now, let's be practical. Alicia does not have to reject the grant. That would be a weak read, too. Long-range observation is not a reason to avoid opportunity. Public agencies need grants. Grants can test solutions, reach underserved residents, improve access, support pilots, and build capability that the regular budget cannot carry yet. The issue is not whether the county should pursue funding. The issue is whether the county can enter the opportunity with control. That means the read has to include the future service signals. The grant funds staff, but no recurring position has been identified. The program requires reporting work no one has time to own. The service depends on contracted support with no renewal plan. The pilot is being described as permanent before the funding is permanent. The program may create demand faster than referral partners can absorb it. The department lacks a data plan for measuring use, outcomes, cost, and service dependency. Finance has not been brought in early enough. Procurement timelines have not been considered. The elected body wants launch visibility, but has not discussed continuation cost. If the program is truly a pilot, call it a pilot. If continuation depends on future funding, say that clearly. If success will create a budget request, define that early. If the county may need to reduce, transition, or close the service at the end of the award period, build that into the communication plan before residents are trained to depend on it. That is not negative. That is honest public administration. The agency is not blocking a useful service. It is checking whether it can carry the promise it is about to create. A controlled grant decision may still move forward, but it will not pretend the future risk disappeared. Maybe the county applies. Maybe the application includes an exit strategy. Maybe the launch language says pilot instead of permanent service. Maybe staff builds sustainability reviews at the 6-month, 12-month, and 18-month marks. Maybe finance is involved before the award is accepted. Maybe the commission sees the future operating cost before the public expectation is created. Maybe referral partners are assessed before outreach expands demand. Maybe the data plan measures not just contacts made, but cost, capacity, service dependency, and continuation risk. That is not overprocessing. That is public sector discipline. Here is what I would tell a county director, city manager, department head, program manager, budget officer, grant manager, or public works leader. Before applying for or accepting a grant-funded service, name the public need clearly. Who needs the service? What access gap exists? What delay, burden, complaint, risk, or public impact is the program trying to reduce? Why does this need matter now? Do not start with the grant. Start with the public need. A funding opportunity is not a strategy by itself. It is a possible tool for a defined problem. Then identify what the grant actually funds. Does it pay for staff, software, vehicles, contractors, training, outreach, reporting support, facilities, data collection, translation or equipment, separate launch support from long-term operating need? Then ask what happens when each funded item stops being funded. This is where leaders catch the cliff early. A grant can fund a coordinator, but what happens to that position after the award? A grant can buy software, but who pays for licenses, maintenance, training, data governance, and staff time later? A grant can fund outreach, but what happens if outreach works and demand increases? Then check the service expectation. Will residents depend on it? Will partners refer people to it? Will elected leaders promote it? Will staff build workflow around it? Will the public see it as permanent? Will another department start relying on it to reduce their own workload? A successful program creates expectation, and expectation needs a plan. Then decide what must be defined before launch. Call it a pilot if it is a pilot. Build a sustainability review. Identify recurring cost. Assign reporting ownership. Define continuation criteria. Define exit criteria. Involve finance early. Communicate the funding horizon honestly. Do not let the decision disappear into a casual, "we will figure that out later." Later is not a sustainability plan. Later needs a budget path, an owner, a timeline, a reporting structure, and a communication strategy. There are a few warning signs I would watch hard. If the grant pays for launch but not continuation, the service can start clean and still create a cliff. If the program is being described as permanent too early, trust risk begins before the first resident is served. Public language matters. If reporting work has no owner, compliance risk is already forming. Grant reporting does not happen because people meant well. It needs capacity, documentation, monitoring, and closeout discipline. If outreach creates more demand than the system can absorb, the access problem may simply move downstream. The resident may get a better first contact and still end up waiting somewhere else in the service chain. Another warning sign is temporary staff becoming part of permanent workflow. Temporary positions can run a pilot, but if the department builds normal service delivery around temporary staff, the agency needs a transition plan before the pilot becomes normal. And watch for success measured only by early activity, contacts made, events held, applications completed, and residents served matter. But activity is not sustainability. Leaders also need to watch cost, capacity, continuation risk, partner load, data quality, and service dependency. The most dangerous warning sign is this: the program looks successful, while the agency's ability to sustain it gets weaker. That is how a good launch becomes a service cliff. So I want to say this plainly. This briefing is not telling public sector leaders to avoid grants. That is not the point. Public service lives inside constraints. Needs are real. Funding is limited. Public expectations are high. Elected leaders want visible progress. Staff are already stretched. Compliance matters. Procurement takes time. Hiring takes time. Budgets move slowly. Trust is easy to damage and hard to rebuild. Grants can be powerful inside that environment, but if you accept funding, accept the future condition with your eyes open. Do not dress it up as sustainability just because the award makes launch possible. The sharper question is this: what service promise are we willing to create? And what evidence says the agency can carry it when the funding changes? If nobody can answer that, the decision is not controlled. If the answer is only the grant pays for it, the reed is too thin. If the program will create public dependency, partner referrals, reporting workload, recurring cost, and political visibility, the leader needs a better plan than hope. Hope is not a budget strategy. Hope is not a staffing plan. Hope is not a compliance plan. Hope is not a public trust strategy. A controlled decision sounds different. It says, this is a 2-year pilot, and here is how we will evaluate continuation. It says, finance will see the recurring cost before we accept the award. It says, reporting ownership is assigned before launch. It says, referral partners have confirmed capacity before outreach expands. It says, if continuation funding is not identified by month 18, we begin transition communication. It says, we will not announce a temporary program like a permanent promise. That is public sector leadership. Not perfect, controlled. So before you spend the grant, look at the next service cliff. Ask what public need you are trying to meet. Ask what the grant actually funds. Ask what expectation the program will create if it works. Ask what the department has to carry after the award period. Ask who owns reporting, data, supervision, procurement, renewal, and communication. Ask what happens if residents depend on the service and the agency cannot continue it. Long-range observation does not block public service. It protects public service from short-sighted funding decisions. It keeps the agency from confusing temporary capacity with permanent service readiness. A grant can help. A grant can open a door. A grant can make action possible. But a grant is not the same as a sustainable service. Read the staffing, read the reporting, read the recurring cost, read the public expectation, read the next service cliff, then decide. Do not create a promise the agency cannot carry. Move with control. Thanks for listening to the briefing.